My hands are still shaking as I sit in my car outside Grandma Ruth's house, staring at the front door I just walked out of 10 minutes ago. The porch light is still on, casting long shadows across the driveway where my Uncle Derek's truck should be parked, but isn't anymore. Because he left. He actually left his own mother's house, stormed out like a teenager having a tantrum, all because of 5 words my 8-year-old son said to him. "I'd rather be kind than be like you." 5 words that cut through 45 years of my uncle's armor like it was paper. 5 words that made a grown man who's never backed down from a fight in his entire life grab his jacket and walk away without saying goodbye to his own mother. 5 words from a little boy who still asks me to check under his bed for monsters, who cried last week when he accidentally stepped on an ant. I need to tell you about my family before this gets too crazy, because what happened tonight isn't going to make sense unless you understand the people involved. My name is Maya Chen, and 6 months ago I moved back to my hometown of Cedar Falls, Ohio, after my marriage completely fell apart. I'm a graphic designer, which in a town of 12,000 people mostly means I design flyers for the high school football games and business cards for the local real estate agents. Not exactly the creative career I dreamed about, but it pays the bills and lets me be home when Ethan gets off the school bus. Ethan is my everything. He's 8 years old, has his father's dark hair and my stubborn streak, though he uses his stubbornness for things like defending injured birds and insisting we donate his old toys to kids who need them more. He's the kind of kid who asks deep questions like, "Mom, why do people hurt each other's feelings on purpose?" and actually listens to the answers. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, calls him an old soul. His classmates sometimes call him weird because he'd rather read during recess than play dodgeball. He's been having a tough time since the divorce, asking questions I don't know how to answer, like why his daddy doesn't visit anymore and whether it's his fault we moved away from our old house. Then there's my Uncle Derek, my dad's younger brother, though you'd never guess Derek was the baby of the family by the way he runs things now that Dad's gone. Derek's the guy everyone in Cedar Falls calls when their truck breaks down or they need help moving furniture. He owns a small construction company, drives a Ford F-150 that's older than I am, and has opinions about everything, especially about how people should raise their kids. He believes in what he calls the old ways. Boys should be tough, girls should be sweet. Emotions are for people who don't have real problems to deal with. He means well, I think, but his version of help often feels more like judgment. Derek's son, Jake, is 16 and basically a carbon copy of his father, except with better abs and a smartphone. Jake's the starting quarterback for Cedar Falls High, dates the head cheerleader, and has never met a mirror he didn't like. He's not a bad kid, exactly, but he's learned that being tough and being mean often look the same from the outside. He treats Ethan like most teenagers treat 8-year-olds, like an annoying little pest who exists primarily for entertainment purposes. The thing is, I've spent most of my adult life trying to keep peace in this family. When Derek makes comments about my parenting, I smile and change the subject. When Jake teases Ethan, I tell Ethan to ignore it and be the bigger person. When anyone suggests that maybe, just maybe, I'm raising my son to be too soft, I defend him quietly and then spend the drive home wondering if they're right. But tonight was different. Tonight, something shifted in a way that I don't think any of us saw coming. Tonight, my gentle, sensitive 8-year-old son looked a grown man in the eye and delivered the kind of truth that adults spend decades trying to avoid hearing about themselves. And the crazy part, he wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He wasn't even angry. He was just being Ethan. Honest, thoughtful, and braver than his mother has ever been. What happened next changed everything. Not just the dinner, not just the evening, but everything. The way our family talks to each other, the way I see my own strength, the way Derek sees himself, the way Jake sees what it means to be a man. It all started with spilled water and ended with the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Let me take you back to 3 hours earlier when this whole thing started. It's Sunday afternoon, and I'm standing in my tiny rental kitchen, watching Ethan carefully arrange homemade chocolate chip cookies in Grandma Ruth's old Tupperware container. He's been working on these cookies for 2 hours, measuring everything twice, making sure they're perfect for tonight's family dinner. "Mom, do you think Uncle Derek will like these?" he asks, holding up a slightly lopsided cookie with genuine concern in his voice. I used extra chocolate chips because Jake said last time that store-bought cookies are for people who don't care enough to try. My heart breaks a little because this is so typical of Ethan. Instead of being hurt by Jake's casual cruelty, he internalized it as a challenge to do better. He's always been like this, looking for ways to win over people who seem determined not to like him. It's a trait I recognize because I inherited it from my mother and apparently passed it down to him like some kind of genetic curse. Moving back to Cedar Falls 6 months ago was supposed to be temporary, just long enough to get back on my feet after David left, to save some money living in Grandma Ruth's old guest house, and to give Ethan some stability while I figured out our next move. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you're too tired to fight for anything better. The divorce drained me in ways I didn't expect. Not just financially, though David's lawyer made sure I walked away with barely enough to start over. Emotionally, I felt like I'd failed at the most important thing I'd ever tried to do, creating a stable family for my son. David left us 18 months ago, and Ethan still doesn't understand why. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes grown-ups just decide they don't want to be married anymore? That sometimes fathers choose their own comfort over their children's happiness? Ethan keeps asking if Daddy will come back for Christmas or his birthday, or just because he misses us. I've stopped making promises I can't keep. The hardest part about moving home has been the Sunday dinners at Grandma Ruth's house. It's supposed to be a family tradition, a way to stay connected, but it feels more like a weekly performance review, where I'm constantly failing. Ruth is 73, barely 5 feet tall, and has been the heart of our family since I was Ethan's age. She raised 4 kids mostly by herself after my grandfather died young, and she's never quite understood why modern parents make everything so complicated. She loves Ethan fiercely, but she also trusts Derek's judgment about boy things in a way that makes my stomach hurt. Derek has been filling the role of family patriarch since my dad died 2 years ago from a sudden heart attack. Dad was the gentle one, the mediator, the person who could make Derek laugh instead of lecture. Without Dad's influence, Derek's opinions have gotten louder and his patience has gotten shorter. He genuinely believes he's helping me raise Ethan, but his version of help involves a lot of criticism about my soft parenting style and suggestions about what Ethan needs to toughen up. The truth is, I've been dreading today's dinner since last Sunday when Derek made a comment about Ethan's art class. "Art's fine for girls," he said, "but boys need activities that build character. Maybe it's time to sign him up for Little League." When I explained that Ethan had tried baseball and hated it, Derek just shook his head like I was missing something obvious. He hated it because he wasn't good at it. That's exactly why he needs to stick with it. Standing in my kitchen today, watching Ethan worry about whether his cookies will be good enough, I can feel that familiar knot in my stomach. The knot that says I'm about to spend the next 3 hours defending choices I'm not even sure I believe in myself. Maybe Derek is right. Maybe I am raising Ethan to be too sensitive, too gentle, too willing to cry when things don't go his way. Maybe the reason David left is because I couldn't be the kind of wife who raises the kind of son men respect. But then Ethan looks up at me with chocolate on his nose and says, "I think Uncle Derek is sad that he doesn't know how to make cookies. Maybe we could teach him sometime." And I remember why I'm fighting so hard to protect this beautiful, empathetic heart of his, even when I don't know if I'm doing it right. The moment we walk through Grandma Ruth's front door, I can feel it. That electric tension that happens when people are trying too hard to act normal. Ruth hugs us both, commenting on how much Ethan has grown since last week, but her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. She's been sensing the growing friction in these family dinners too, though she'd never say anything directly. Peace at any cost has been her survival strategy for 7 decades. Derek's truck was already in the driveway when we arrived, which meant he and Jake had been here for a while. I could hear Derek's booming laugh from the kitchen, telling Ruth some story about a job site mishap, but when we walked in, the conversation stopped just a beat too long. The kind of pause that means people were talking about you right before you showed up. "There's my favorite nephew," Derek announces, reaching over to ruffle Ethan's carefully combed hair. Ethan smiles politely but steps slightly behind me, a move that Derek definitely notices. "Getting pretty tall there, buddy. Maybe it's time to start bulking up a little, huh?" Jake snorts from his position, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. Bulk up? He's like a twig, Dad. I could snap him in half. He says it like it's a joke, but there's an edge to it that makes my protective instincts flare. Jake! The warning in my voice is quiet but clear. What? I'm just saying. When I was his age, I was already playing tackle football, building some real muscle. Jake flexes dramatically and Derek grins with obvious pride. That's my boy. That's what happens when you push yourself, instead of hiding in your room with art supplies. Derek's comment is aimed at me as much as Ethan, and we both know it. Dinner starts normally enough. Ruth has made her famous pot roast and everyone compliments the food, passes dishes around, makes small talk about work and school. But I can feel Derek watching Ethan, cataloging every small thing. The way he cuts his meat into tiny pieces, how he asks politely for the salt instead of just reaching for it, the careful way he wipes his mouth with his napkin between bites. Then it happens. Ethan reaches across the table for the bowl of mashed potatoes, stretching a little too far, and his elbow catches his water glass. It topples over, sending water cascading across the tablecloth toward Ruth's good plates. The sound of glass hitting the table seems impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Ethan's eyes go wide, and I can see him processing what just happened. The accident, the mess, everyone staring at him. His bottom lip starts to quiver, and I know he's about to cry. Not from pain, but from pure embarrassment and the overwhelming feeling of having messed up in front of everyone. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, he whispers, his voice getting thick with tears. I didn't mean to, Grandma Ruth. I'm really sorry. That's when Derek slams his fork down on his plate with a sharp clang that makes everyone jump. Boys don't cry, he says, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Stop raising him like a girl, Maya. The words hit me like a physical blow. I feel my face flush hot with anger and embarrassment. Around the table, everyone freezes. Ruth's hand hovers over her napkin. Jake looks up from his phone with sudden interest, and Ethan's tears stop mid-track as he processes what his uncle just said about him. Derek, he's just... I start, but he cuts me off. Just what? Just acting like a baby because he spilled some water? Maya, look at him. He's 8 years old, not 3. When Jake spilled something at that age, you know what happened? I told him to clean it up and be more careful next time. No tears, no drama, no coddling. I can feel my hands shaking under the table. This is the moment I always dread, when Derek's criticism stops being subtle suggestions and becomes direct attacks on how I'm raising my son. But what makes it worse is that Ethan is sitting right here, hearing every word, learning that crying makes him weak, that his emotions are something to be ashamed of. You're turning him soft, Maya, Derek continues, seemingly oblivious to the devastation he's causing. He needs a man's influence. Look at Jake. He doesn't fall apart when things get tough. Jake, clearly enjoying his moment in the spotlight, grins and adds his own twist of cruelty. Yeah, what are you, 5? Real boys don't cry over spilled water. And that's when I see something shift in Ethan's face. The tears stop completely and something else takes their place. Not anger exactly, but a kind of quiet determination that I've never seen before. In the silence that follows Jake's cruel laughter, I watch my son in a way I've never watched him before. The tears have completely stopped, and there's something in his posture that's different, straighter, more solid. It's like watching a flower suddenly decide to become a tree. Derek is still glaring at both of us, waiting for the usual script to play out. The script where I apologize for Ethan's sensitivity, where Ethan mumbles sorry and shrinks into himself, where Ruth changes the subject to something safe like the weather, and where we all pretend this kind of thing is normal. But Ethan isn't following the script. Instead, he looks directly at Derek. Not the quick, nervous glances he usually gives his uncle, but a steady, thoughtful look that seems to go on forever. When he finally speaks, his voice isn't the trembling whisper I expected. It's calm, clear, and so matter-of-fact that it takes everyone a moment to process what he's actually saying. Why can't boys cry? He asks, and the question hangs in the air like something physical. Crying doesn't make you weak, it makes you honest. Derek's face goes through about 3 different expressions in rapid succession: surprise, annoyance, and then something that looks like he's gearing up to put this child in his place once and for all. But before he can respond, Ethan continues, and I realize my 8-year-old son has thought about this more deeply than any of us gave him credit for. When I cry, it's because something matters to me, Ethan says, still looking directly at Derek. Like when I spilled the water, I cried because I didn't want to ruin Grandma Ruth's nice dinner or make extra work for her. That's not being weak. That's caring about other people. Jake stops scrolling through his phone. Ruth's hand has frozen halfway to her napkin. I can feel my heart pounding so hard I'm sure everyone can hear it. This isn't just my son defending himself. This is him defending something bigger, something that none of us adults have had the courage to defend. Derek's face is getting redder, and I can see him preparing to shut this down the way he always does, with authority, with volume, with the unspoken rule that children don't get to question adults in this family. But something about Ethan's steady gaze seems to throw him off balance. "Ethan, you don't understand," Derek starts, but Ethan isn't finished. "I understand that you think crying means I'm like a girl, and being like a girl is bad," Ethan says, and his voice gets a little stronger. "But Mom cries sometimes, and she's the strongest person I know. She works every day to take care of us, and she moved us here even though it was scary for her, and she never gives up even when things are really hard. If that's what being like a girl means, then maybe being like a girl isn't a bad thing." The silence that follows is deafening. I can hear the old wall clock ticking, the sound of a car driving by outside, my own pulse thundering in my ears. Derek looks like someone just slapped him, and Jake has completely forgotten about his phone. But Ethan still isn't done. He takes a breath, and I can see him gathering courage for whatever he's about to say next. In that moment, I realize that all those times I thought I was failing him, all those times I worried I was raising him wrong, I was actually raising him to be exactly this: brave enough to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable, even when the adults in the room don't want to hear it. "I think you're scared, Uncle Derek," Ethan says, and his voice is gentle now, almost sad. "I think you're scared that if you let yourself cry, or if you let Jake cry, people won't think you're strong anymore. But hiding your feelings doesn't make them go away. It just makes everyone around you walk on eggshells." Derek's mouth opens and closes like he's trying to find words that just aren't there. This isn't a tantrum from a child that he can shut down with authority. This isn't disrespect that he can punish. This is truth, delivered with such innocent clarity that it cuts through decades of carefully constructed defenses. And then Jake, of all people, does something that surprises everyone. He laughs, not the mean, mocking laugh from before, but something that sounds almost nervous, almost relieved. Jake's nervous laugh breaks whatever spell has been holding this moment together, and it's not a kind sound. It's the laugh of someone who's been backed into a corner and doesn't know how to get out gracefully. He looks around the table, realizes everyone is staring at him, and does what he always does when he feels exposed. He gets mean. "Oh my God, seriously?" Jake stands up, towering over Ethan's small frame. "You're going to lecture us about feelings? You're 8 years old, dude. You don't know anything about the real world." But instead of shrinking back like he usually does, Ethan just looks up at his teenage cousin with those steady eyes and says something that stops my heart completely. "You're right. I don't know about the real world yet, but I know about kindness. And I know that you don't smile anymore unless you think no one's watching." The accuracy of that observation hits Jake like a physical blow. His mouth falls open, and for just a second I see past the swagger and the football uniform and the practiced confidence, and I see what Ethan sees. A 16-year-old boy who's been performing masculinity for so long he's forgotten what his actual personality looks like. But Jake recovers quickly, the way teenagers do, with anger and volume. What's that supposed to mean? Ethan stands up too, and even though Jake is literally twice his size, something about my son's calm presence makes him seem bigger, more solid. "It means I see you when you think no one's looking," Like last week when you helped Grandma Ruth carry in her groceries, you were really gentle with her, and you smiled for real. Or when you found that injured bird in her backyard and made a little nest for it. You didn't tell anyone about that, but I saw... Jake's face goes through a series of expressions that would be funny if this weren't so heartbreaking. Surprise, embarrassment, and then something that looks like panic, because Ethan is systematically dismantling the tough guy image Jake has spent years building. "That's different," Jake mumbles, but he's lost his fire. "No, it's not different," Ethan says. And now he turns to look at Derek, who has been watching this exchange with growing discomfort. "Uncle Derek, I see you too. You pretend you don't care about feelings, but when Grandpa died, you cried at the funeral. I remember. And you hug Grandma Ruth every time you leave here, really tight, like you're scared something might happen to her." Derek's face has gone completely white. "Ethan, that's enough." "But my son, my brave, beautiful, impossible son," just shakes his head. "I don't think it is enough. I think everyone in this family is scared to be real with each other, and it's making everyone sad." He walks around the table, past Jake, past me, until he's standing directly in front of Derek's chair. My uncle is still sitting, which means Ethan has to look up at him, but somehow he doesn't seem small at all. "Uncle Derek, I love you," Ethan says, and his voice is so full of sincerity that it makes my chest ache. "But I feel sorry for you too." Those words land like a bomb in the middle of our family dinner. Derek's face goes through shock, anger, and then something that looks like grief. "You feel sorry for me?" "Yes," Ethan says simply, "because you think being mean makes you strong, but it just makes everyone sad when you're around. Even Jake doesn't smile when you're watching him play football. He looks scared. And that's not strength, Uncle Derek. That's fear." The silence that follows is unlike anything I've ever experienced. It's the sound of a family's entire foundation shifting, of assumptions that have never been questioned suddenly being examined in broad daylight by a child who sees everything we've trained ourselves not to see. Derek tries to stand up, his chair scraping against the floor, but Ethan isn't finished. My dad left because he didn't know how to be kind either. He thought being tough meant never saying sorry, never admitting when he was wrong, never showing love unless it looked like strength. But that's not what being a man is. That's just being scared. And then Ethan does the most devastating thing of all. He looks up at Derek with those clear, honest eyes and says, "Uncle Derek, are you scared like my daddy was?" Derek stares down at him for what feels like forever, his mouth opening and closing like he's drowning. Then, without saying a word, he pushes back from the table, grabs his jacket from the back of his chair, and walks toward the front door. The sound of Derek's truck starting in the driveway breaks the spell that's been holding us all frozen around this dinner table. Through the window, I watch his headlights sweep across the front yard as he backs out, and I realize that in 32 years of knowing my uncle, I've never once seen him walk away from a confrontation. Derek faces down everything. Aggressive customers, broken equipment, family arguments that have lasted for years. But my 8-year-old son just said something that sent him running. Jake is still standing where Ethan left him, looking like someone pulled the rug out from under his entire world. He keeps glancing between the front door where his father disappeared and Ethan, who has calmly returned to his seat and is now carefully cleaning up the spilled water with his napkin, like nothing earth-shattering just happened. "I should probably go after him," Jake says, but he doesn't move toward the door. Instead, he sits back down heavily, and for the first time since he hit his growth spurt, he looks like the confused teenager he actually is, instead of the confident young man he pretends to be. Grandma Ruth is the first one to find her voice. She reaches across the table and takes Ethan's hand in both of hers, and I can see tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," she whispers, and her voice is thick with emotion. "He always said the bravest thing a person could do was tell the truth with love. That's exactly what you just did, sweetheart." Ethan looks up at her with those serious eyes. "Are you sad that Uncle Derek left, Grandma?" Ruth considers this for a long moment, wiping her face with her free hand. "I'm sad that he's hurting so much he couldn't stay to hear what you were trying to tell him. But I'm not sad that someone finally said what needed to be said. Sometimes love looks like hard truth, Ethan. You showed him more love tonight than anyone has in years. Jake suddenly speaks up, his voice quieter than I've ever heard it. How did you know? About the bird, I mean, and the other stuff. Ethan turns to his cousin with genuine surprise. I pay attention. You're really nice when you think no one's watching. You just act different when your dad's around. Yeah, well, Jake runs his hand through his hair, a gesture so much like Derek it's startling. He expects me to be tough, you know? Like him. But you don't have to be like him, Ethan says with the kind of simple clarity that only children possess. You can be like yourself. Jake stares at him for a long moment, and I can see something shifting behind his eyes. I don't even remember what that feels like anymore. The honesty in that admission breaks my heart. This 16-year-old boy, who I've watched torment my son for months, has been performing masculinity for so long he's lost touch with his own personality. How many boys are walking around like that? How many men? We finish dinner in a strange, gentle quiet. Jake asks Ethan about his drawings, and I watch my son light up as he describes the comic book he's been working on. Jake actually laughs, a real laugh, when Ethan explains that the superhero's power is making people feel better about themselves. That's actually pretty cool, Jake says and means it. Could you show me sometime? I mean, if you want to. Really? Ethan's face brightens. You want to see my drawings? Yeah, I do. Maybe you could teach me how to draw something. I've always wanted to try, but Dad says art is... He trails off, realizing what he was about to say. Art is for everyone, Ethan says firmly. Mom says creativity makes people happy. 3 days later, my phone rings while I'm making breakfast. Derek's name appears on the screen, and I almost don't answer. When I finally do, his voice sounds different, smaller, more uncertain. Maya? I was wondering if maybe I could take Ethan to lunch this Saturday. Just the two of us. I owe him an apology, and I think I need to learn some things from him. 6 months later, our Sunday dinners have transformed completely. Derek still has opinions, but now he asks questions instead of making pronouncements. He started seeing a counselor, something he would have called soft a year ago. Jake quit football and joined the school's art club, where he discovered he has a talent for photography. He's been documenting life in our small town, capturing moments of genuine connection and quiet beauty. But the biggest change is in me. I stopped apologizing for raising a kind son and started celebrating it. Ethan taught our entire family that real strength isn't about suppressing emotions or dominating others. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable, to speak truth with love, and to choose connection over control. Sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest heart, and sometimes that heart is exactly what a broken family needs to heal. Looking back now, sitting in that same driveway where this all began, I realize that night changed more than just our family dynamics. It changed how I see courage itself. Real courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about feeling the fear and choosing love anyway. It's about an 8-year-old boy standing up to grown men twice his size because kindness matters more than keeping the peace. Ethan is 10 now, and he still has that same gentle spirit that worried me so much back then. The difference is, I'm not worried anymore. I'm proud. Because I've learned that raising a son who chooses empathy over anger, who speaks truth with love, who sees people hidden pain and responds with compassion. That's not creating weakness. That's creating the kind of man this world desperately needs. If you're a parent struggling with family members who tell you you're raising your children wrong because you're teaching them emotional intelligence, because you're showing them it's okay to cry, because you're prioritizing kindness over conformity, keep going. The world needs more Ethans, not fewer. And if you're someone like Derek was, someone who learned that strength means never showing vulnerability, that love must look like toughness, that emotions are enemies to be conquered, it's never too late to learn a different way. My uncle is proof that even the most hardened hearts can soften when they're met with genuine love instead of judgment. If this story touched your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a parent who's questioning their gentle approach to raising children. Maybe it's someone who grew up believing that emotions were weakness. Maybe it's a family member who's forgotten that love and strength can coexist. Hit that like button if you believe, like I do, that the world needs more kindness and fewer people trying to prove how tough they are. And please, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. I share stories like this every week about real families finding their way back to love and connection. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment when a child taught you something profound about courage or kindness? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the content I create. Most importantly, if you're raising children in a world that sometimes feels hostile to gentleness, remember this. You're not making them weak, you're making them brave enough to change the world, one honest conversation at a time. Thank you for listening to our story. I'll see you in the next video.